All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan, here with Bob Rose, and yeah, it's now the off season. OTAs are starting today, but the draft's over, free agency's pretty much over. We're going to be struggling for content, so I'm going to throw rumor mills up there. I mean, it's bad when there's an entire day's worth of discussion about the silly pictures that Hayner took. You know, I'm just like, I don't get it. I mean, some of the poses I've seen rap albums worse covers than that. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. I'm not, I'm not even going there right now. Um, So the OTA started. This is the first time that the team has pretty much gotten together. There's only been a couple people who are out. Michael Thomas is one of them, I believe,
hmm
and there's like 10 people who are not there. But this is really the first time you start seeing what this team is going to look like now.
Yeah.
Um, what are your impressions? I mean, it's you're running around in shorts and shells, but what are your impressions of like what you've seen, at least the footage, the video footage they're throwing out there in the internet?
Uh, and I'm like you. I don't pay a lot of attention, to the shorts Olympics. Um, but and I definitely put zero credibility into, such and such defensive linemen look great, such and such offensive linemen look great. Guys, they do not touch each other. There's no,
I know.
there's no. They look great if they walked onto the practice field and walked off of the practice field. The thing to take away from from these OTAs is maybe a little bit of chemistry gets worked up between the quarterback and receivers. The one on ones, the rare one on ones between defensive backs and receivers. That provides the most of your entertainment. Otherwise, it's just guys shaking off some of the football rust. That's it. Not every single
Yeah.
year throughout the league, you always have one or two guys go down, with some kind of freak injury, whether it's ACL or Achilles. And you pray to Lord that doesn't happen. Really to any young player, but especially a player on your own favorite team. That's what I take away from this. That, and it's a chance for, for the players to get to know the coaches a little bit better, and vice versa. And that's really important, especially for this year's Saints, because remember, this team has almost an entirely new defensive staff, and it has so many new players on offense that need to get acclimated to Pete Carmichael and Ronald Curry and Cody Burns' way of doing things on the offensive end.
Yeah, I mean, there's installation of the playbook going on right now, and people, just really underestimate that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think Nick Underhill posted that uh, Derek Carr went today passing, and like you said, it's really pitch and catch out there. They're not. They are just getting comfortable with the practice routine. The first mini camp probably is more of a gauge of shorts and shells more than this. This looks a
Mm-hmm.
lot like when your buddies come out and somebody comes walking out with a football.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to be ugly, but it really is. It's just that they're going to be out there throwing. Now they are going to work on things.
Mm-hmm.
There's stuff that happens in the classroom, and then they walk through it in a practice. But basically, yeah, like you said, the offensive lineman and defensive lineman can't touch each other. They get fined if they do. Heck,
Yeah.
that's the thing. The league will come after you for too physical of an OTA. So that's why the main reasons why the media is not in there, and it's going to be a lot of instruction going on. They'll stop things. They'll talk about it. They'll have guys walk through different things. I mean, I think one of the stories I saw, one of the tweets I saw had DeMarco Jackson lined up as a starter. Okay,
Yeah.
the depth chart is nothing. It's a guy who you want to see if he can run. You're going to put him in with with the quote unquote starters to see what he looks like getting the most reps. That's all.
Hmm.
I mean, it's. But all that being said, I'm excited to see these guys out there because this feels a lot like, I don't want to say 2006 because that's not, because we're not coming off a 3-13 season,
Hmm.
but it feels like 2000 and 2006 from the standpoint of this is really the first time that this coaching staff got together and
Yeah.
is put so many new faces on this team that it's kind of like a new team coming out. Um, yeah, you can go through and say, well, really, they're going to be playing the entire same secondary. They're going to be playing the same linebackers. But it still feels, with the defensive line changes and the offensive skill position changes, it feels like this is kind of like a new team, Dennis Allen's actual team walking out there, not Sean Payton's leftovers that kind of last year kind of felt like.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but you are 100% correct. Because last year, even though there was a new head coach, and kind of a new quarterback, still questions at the quarterback position. The rest
Mm-hmm.
of the coaching staff had remained the same. 95% of the remainder of the roster remained the same. But now, like you said, similar to 2000, similar to 2006, you have almost an entirely new coaching staff, at least half of it. You have a new
Mm-hmm.
quarterback, as both of those teams did. You have several new
Mm-hmm.
players, new projected starters. This isn't just new faces on the depth chart. This team could have as many as 6 to 7 new starters. On both sides of the ball combined. That's a little bit of a stretch, but it's possible. Certainly 4 or 5 new starters. Return to health of some players like 2006. The 2006 team was getting Deuce McAllister back. This team hopes to get a Michael Thomas back. So on and so forth. And like you said, a lot of the same leadership is returning on the field with this team, just as there was in '06. Not as many, but just as there was in
Mm-hmm.
2000. A lot of people forget that a lot of that Ditka defense was carried over, into the 2000 squad when Haslett came in. But other than that, I hadn't thought about your comparisons, but they're dead on the money. And this is, and I have written about it a couple of times. This is truly Dennis Allen's team. You couldn't say that last year at all.
No, and that's what's really striking me about this. It's like, okay, so the 7-10 team last year had some good stuff, a lot of bad stuff. I feel like he kind of got his practice gear out the way, and this is what he looked at it and said, this is what I want this team to be able to do. So it's sink or swim now. I've been saying all off season he has no excuses. He got the
Mhm.
team he want. You can't really think of a player or a coach he didn't get that he wanted this year. He got the draft. The draft fell just the way he wanted it to fall. I mean, it doesn't mean that this team is perfect, no, but it means that this team has got a lot of his personality as opposed to Sean Payton's personality, which is what last year's team more or less was. Um, One thing I did notice, Derek Carr works out. Those
Yeah.
are, Drew Brees. I'm not going to say Drew Brees was skinny, but Drew Brees didn't have the muscle definition that Derek Carr has right now. He showed off some guns today. Um, I thought that was like Taysom Hill standing out there at some points. Uh, and the league has made a couple of rule changes. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Number one, the league is going to go back to what it used to be, allowing a third quarterback to be the guy who doesn't count against the active roster.
Mhm.
He's the emergency quarterback, which is some people call it the San Francisco 49ers rule because of what happened to them in the NFC Championship game last year. But it's a rule that they really shouldn't have made go away anyway, because you want to have that emergency quarterback because a lot of teams went to carrying just two quarterbacks because they
Yeah.
needed that extra roster spot. So I think that helps Hayner a lot. I think Hayner's pretty much a lock for the roster as
Mhm.
that emergency quarterback. Um, and you could still play Taysom Hill at the quarterback position if you don't want to really activate Hayner. Um, and the other one is the owners voted on it. I don't know if it's going to get activated for this year or if it's passed to do that this year, but they want to make all fair catch punts and kickoffs start at the 20 that are touchbacks start at the 25-yard line. They're slowly phasing out the kicking game. I'm noticing. Did that rule pass, or how is this? How do you see this?
It did pass on a contingency basis. If I'm not mistaken, they're going to try it out during the preseason,
Mm-hmm.
and with an eye on making it full time for the 2024-25 regular season. Yeah, please, folks. If I'm wrong, please point it out. Point it out in the comments for us. But I believe that's the direction that they're tilting. But for sure, as Alan pointed out, it did pass. And
Yeah.
it's one thing I don't mind the kickoff part of it because that's pretty much what was happening anyway. But the punt return. You've made punting nearly obsolete.
Yeah.
You just you might as well going back to what you said tongue in cheek about OTAs being just kind of backyard pitch and catch. That's another way that the Nazi Goodell regime has altered and watered down. I'm trying to use my best PG-13 approach
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Watered down the game, and again, you have a punter like Thomas Morstead or a punter like 2021 Blake Gillikin, who was very adept at pinning a team inside their 10, even inside their 5-yard line. And if you played football from a young age, and you and I still probably have the coach's screams echoed in our heads. Plant your feet at the 9-yard line, and if the ball is over your head, let it go. Well,
Yeah.
that literally throws everything out the window. And
Mm-hmm.
don't give me the bullshit about player safety. If they gave a shit about that, there wouldn't be Thursday night games. There wouldn't be before Roger Goodell cured COVID a couple years ago. There wouldn't be games postponed until Tuesday or Wednesday, and then those same teams turning back around and playing on Sunday afternoon. So don't give me this bullshit about player safety. We know better. Just
Well,
call it for what it is.
yeah. It's funny because I was going to bring this up later on. They're now talking about flexing Thursday night
Yeah.
games. So no longer will it be Sunday night and Monday night football. And once again, we're diminishing Monday night football, but yeah, they are going to flex Thursday night games. So imagine you played a road game, a late road game on Thursday, or I'm sorry, on Sunday, and because you're matched up against a divisional opponent who you're fighting for the division title, you could theoretically get flexed to Thursday night.
Yep.
And especially if Sunday Night Football already has a big game.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's going to be the Chiefs against the Bengals. Thursday night. I mean, not Thursday, Sunday night. That same Sunday night. Well, they're not going to flex that game out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're, I don't know, Miami playing Buffalo, and before this game, or let's say the Jets. Let's just say Aaron Rodgers has the year that Brett Favre did not have. And the Jets are an up and coming team. They're on a 7 or 8 game winning streak. It is possible to see a Thursday night game, Jets versus Bills. If the Jets played, I don't know, the Seahawks Sunday afternoon. And I'm just throwing these teams out there, but just the theory is there. And so if you're going to be giving me a lecture about player safety and you're going to be playing Thursday night games after Thanksgiving because of the ratings, that's ridiculous. It really is. It's just, between that and the 2 European games, it's just. I told somebody on Twitter, I said Tuesday Night Football is going to be reality soon.
Oh yeah.
Goodell's goal, and it's not just Goodell, because he is as evil as he is. He is responding to the ownership puppet masters.
No doubt.
The ownership would love to have almost every day football because the NFL expanding their brand, being out there all the time. They know people go to watch the game. They know these streaming services are going to grab them and play. This is going to be their secret because the networks are dying because people are cutting the cord and everything else. So yeah, the future is the streaming services, and that is a lot easier to run than networks and so forth. You can expand, and oh my God, it's horrible. Because it's the off season, I end up watching old football games. There's a guy on YouTube who's spending a lot of time restoring football games. He restored Super Bowl 8, which was not. It's hard to find a copy of Super Bowl 8.
It is.
It's pretty clear. Just like Super Bowl 4. He restored that, but the way he did it, the only copy you can find of Super Bowl 4 is a black and white Canadian Broadcast Company version of the game. So what he did was he cleaned up the black and white, spliced in NFL Films footage of Super Bowl 4, and complete with all the Hank Stram-isms in there, some outtakes from Super Bowl 4 that didn't make the highlight tape, and really reconstructed the whole game. And it's really, really good. I mean, he has replays, he has graphics that run on it and stuff. He did a lot of work on this, and I really encourage people to look at it. It's Backdoor Dave, I think, is what the Godzilla Rocks is somebody else who reshares his stuff, but it's a lot of fun to watch that now. And there's a few others out there who are sharing all kinds of game footage of various games and stuff like that. Weird stuff is it's hard for me to find any Saints games, complete Saints games, other than the playoff game from the 2000 season. I can find every single NFL game of the week from 1979 except for Week 7, which Buccaneers only of it. If VHS of that game, but I really want fun game to. So can't find anywhere. Nobody shares that. But I'll be damned I can find 4 different versions of the 1977 Saints Bucks game, which I do not recommend anyone watch.
No.
That's when the Bucks snapped the game losing streak against the Saints, and it's a miserable game to look at. It's horrible. Yeah, Goodell is messing with my connection because he knows what I'm saying is Stalinist.
Well, and listen, I'd actually like to clarify what I said before. My COVID comment. That's no disrespect to anybody that's dealt with COVID. I am not one of those anti-conspiracy theorists that didn't believe that COVID existed. That is purely a shot at Goodell, because if you folks have noticed that season, every single week, and I mean every single week during the regular season, there were players on both sides that would test positive for COVID. Now, rarely would you see one of the better teams affected with their best players, other than maybe a certain New Orleans team that had Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, and three quarterbacks out for a Monday night game. But that's neither
Yeah.
here nor there. Uh, and then miraculously in the playoffs, literally nobody. In wild card,
Yeah.
divisional championship, and Super Bowl, nobody tested positive. So I came up with the logical theory that Roger Goodell, I blame him on all these historical disasters, but I'll give him credit. He obviously cured COVID. So thank you, Roger.
Oh, if if it was a critical game with a big market, Baltimore Ravens, you notice they rescheduled the whole thing because like,
Yep.
oh wait, too many people are out. But Denver, you got to play. You got to play with
Yeah.
Denver had to play with a wide receiver at quarterback. And
Right.
that was an ugly game. And the Saints didn't help it by basically just dumping their playbook and running a preseason offense. So
Yeah.
a lot of people really took my boy here to task for having a bad game. But he had been studying all week to run these plays, and they tell him Saturday night, don't worry about that, all that stuff you've been studying. We're just going to run this. And lo and behold, he looked like shit doing it. I mean, what do you expect? You
Well,
know,
and I don't blame Sean Payton for scrapping that game plan, because to use the old Chuck
I
Noll
don't
saying,
either.
there are four things that can happen when you drop back to pass the ball, and three of them are bad. So yeah, I'd have done the same exact thing if I was Payton.
Yeah, I would have too. I just would have preferred. I guess I would prefer, first off, that game not be played or
Yeah, no doubt.
rescheduled
Yeah,
for another time. Yeah, but
yeah,
secondly, I really wish, people would look at that and say, yeah, I'm going to throw out that performance because he really didn't have a chance to show what he can do because that's not what he prepared for all week.
right.
And that's why they prepare all week. Yeah, the player it has no. Well, they conceded so much power to Goodell and the
Yeah.
ownership. Um, and they're going to do it again when they have the next contract talks. They're going to do the same
Yep.
thing, and the owners have them by the collective balls.
Pretty
The
much. Yeah. What
players
and
can't.
It's
Go ahead.
partially the
Go
play.
ahead.
You're right. The owners do have them by the collective balls, but at the same time, the players' union, I believe, needs different slash stronger leadership, a more focused leadership. Leadership that's going to focus on post career kind of stuff. And I'm not talking about the quote unquote player safety bullshit. I'm talking about more, you and I know plenty of former players that would love to chime in on this. Better
Mm-hmm.
benefits for the players and their families after retirement. But instead, what they do, the players will give up such things like, that they'll allow an extra. They won't fight an extra regular season game, and an 18 game regular season is coming like that. Probably at the next bargaining agreement, uh,
Absolutely.
they'll they'll give up things like that if it means surrendering a preseason game. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not getting anything out of it. Matter of fact, your star players are getting more wear and tear because of that. Uh, less, and we see it during OTAs and mini camps now. Less physical activity. They'll concede that. They'll get that and in the process surrender something else. So I do blame the players' union, and the players themselves are limited a little bit, but they really, really need stronger union leadership and better focused union leadership on the future of the individual player.
Yeah, when we went from a 14 game to a 16 game schedule in 1978, We had 6 preseason games back then, and
Hmm.
it moved to 4 preseason. So yeah, we are going to go to an 18 game schedule, and it will just be 2 preseason games. Um, and probably they will stick in 2 bye weeks as a concession.
Yeah.
Okay, to kind of balance it out, because
Yeah.
the other thing they'd like to do is extend football well into February.
Oh yeah.
Um, pushing the draft further down, shortening the off season so you have more year round football. They're all for that.
Hmm.
Um, because again, like I said, when I'm watching old football games, here they are in week 14, week 15. That is the first week of December. The season is ending by the second week of December. The playoffs are wrapping up. NFC Championship games are being and AFC Championship games are being played the week between Christmas and New
Hmm.
Year's. Back then, when it was a 14 game schedule with 6 preseason games. So how did they do that back then and not have all these, the season going into late January? The way they did that was preseason games started in early August. You know, um, you had basically about a week before the week of the first week of training camp was the Hall of Fame game,
Yep.
and preseason games were starting the first week of training camp. So yeah, that's how they did it.
Hmm.
In the first game of September. I'm sorry, I just saw this. Oh,
That.
Arthur.
Yeah. Yeah. I got nothing to say. That just
Well,
speaks for itself.
I'm going back in time again, but we've gone from Kathy Ireland and Cindy Crawford to Martha Stewart. I'd rather see Kathy Ireland and Cindy Crawford at their age now
Oh
on a
yeah.
swimsuit cover as opposed to Martha Stewart.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back, yeah, I was a kid that had Kathy Ireland as a teenager, or as a college student, I had Kathy Ireland swimsuit calendar, and they were swimsuits in the legal sense, if that helps. They were not swimsuits that people would actually wear to the beach, but much
Yeah.
to my chagrin. Anyway, and I know people right now going, Kathy Ireland. God, I haven't heard that name in years. Um, yeah, I had all those girls' names memorized a long time ago. Um, and I'm glad you brought this up because I was just about to transition into this. Speaking of the marketing of the league, we found out today. I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently the Saints are being marketed to France. What is this? What is this about? What do you know about this, Bob?
Not much, and folks, we did put up a piece on it. I didn't write it. I believe our John Hendricks did, but you can go on to the Saints News Network page, and read it. He published it this morning. What basically it is more of a figurehead, a type of thing. No, these NFL franchises, and I believe at the end of the day, or by training camp, basically, if not before, there are going to be 21 NFL franchises involved with European markets, as far as marketing. What that basically is a European city or a country adopting a team, for lack of a better term. And it is a European overseas advertisement, because I expect Mexico to get involved with it too. You might even see South America get involved with it, or perhaps the Middle East. Certain Middle East countries as well. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of an extra advertising kind of thing, like the New Orleans Saints. I mean, what better partnership could the city of New Orleans or the Gulf Coast region in general have, with another country than France itself? And that's just going to be their adopted overseas team, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Florida Lee, obviously French inspired. that is all over the French flag and not French flag, New Orleans flag, but it's a symbol of from France. Uh, well, I was going to say, Avery, that we can become an existential threat to the rest of the league. We'll discuss the pointlessness of why of why we have to play this game. We all smoke cigarettes and eat croissants and just bitch about stuff. But yeah, I would just it just popped up in my feed today, and it was just there was not even talk about what they were doing with this, and it just I didn't know what to make of it, other than the fact that they're going to market these teams in these countries to try and drum up interest, because clearly Goodell would love to expand into Europe. The difficulty in that is if you're trying to play a 17 or 18 game schedule, how do you deal with the time zone difference? You would have to have, say, a London team um, host like 4 straight home games
Yep.
and then go on the road for 4 straight weeks,
Yep.
uh, just to try and compensate for this. And teams would have to have a bye either before or after a
Yep.
European game just to get used to the time change. I mean, I'd rather see a team in Hawaii before I would in London or Germany or France.
Yeah,
Mexico and
because
Canada makes sense, but
at least that even though it's not continental America, it's still
mm,
America. And look, I have a lot of European followers and a lot of European pages that follow me and follow our network, and I appreciate that. But folks, this is the NFL, not the IFL. This is not the International Football League. This is not the European Football League. But to your point, Alan, wouldn't it be a hell of a lot easier? Here we are, Alan Ulrich and Bob Rose once again tying in,
mm,
tying in Goodell's reasoning and why things happen the way that they do on the next collective bargaining agreement, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is 2025 after the conclusion of next season.
I think so. I
Okay.
think it is.
I know it's coming up pretty shortly, but anyway, on the next collective bargaining agreement, there will be an 18-game schedule. To go along with that, there will be 2 regular season buys, which, all of a sudden, that clears it up schematically to have a European franchise or two, because now they've
Hmm.
opened up the London market quite some time ago. Now they're working hard on the German market. With I believe two games in Germany this year, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean
Absolutely.
you see it. He's talked openly about Madrid, Spain before. So you see it coming, folks. Yeah, it doesn't.
Hmm.
This is why Goodell pisses me off so much. And man, Sean Williams would be so proud of us right now because we are so far off the rails. Um,
I know.
but this is what pisses me, and you run that risk every time you drop the name Roger Goodell in front of or around Bob
Oh
Rose.
yeah.
But
Yep.
um, the reason why Goodell pisses me off so much is not because he's corrupt. There's a lot of corrupt out there. It's not because he's evil. There's a lot of evil out there. It's that he is so blatant about it, that it's insulting to my, and I don't consider myself a smart man, but it's insulting to my intelligence. That right there is what pisses me off. And it pisses me off equally that more people don't call him out on this stuff. Don't let him get away with it. Granted, there's very little that you or me or the average person can do, but collectively, don't let him get away with it. I don't know what we could do, but it's just, again,
Well,
it's insulting to my
yeah.
intelligence.
My problem, one of my many problems with Goodell, is he is making the game, he is making the league richer, but he's not making the game better.
No.
All his concern about safety, all his concern about player longevity and all these other things, these rules he has for protecting that the league passes for protecting the players. Really, it's about protecting the pocketbooks because the
Hmm.
last thing they want to have to go through is kind of like what they saw in this past NFC Championship game. They do not want to see a game where you have a title game being battled between a guy like Josh Johnson versus I'm going to say even Minshew not even being in the game. A guy like I'm trying to think, Ian Book. They don't want to see that.
No.
They don't want to see a game with a lot of the stars out. And like you said, when you said he cured COVID, they just stopped testing, obviously, because they didn't want to risk having those guys not playing in a game
Hmm.
like that because they know that people come to see the stars. And the stars are on offense that score a lot of points. The refs call penalties to keep it close. They hold their flags a lot more in important games versus, a game between two also rans. So, I don't feel like the game is better to watch. It's just, you feel cynical the whole time you're watching it. It's like, oh, of course they're going to throw a flag now.
Hmm.
Of course this flag comes out now. Got to keep it close. Give them one more shot. Keep it, keep the thing. And I think the rules about the kicking game very much impact that
Yep.
because now instead of starting inside your 5 because you've got a punter who can pooch kick it, or instead of a kickoff that brings the ball almost to midfield, because you've had a great returner on that, in the name of safety, we're going to just put the ball at 25-yard line, and teams are going to have to march from there. And there's your opportunity, offenses, to do stuff. But we're going to throw flags for pass interference. We're not going to change that rule,
No.
where a guy, like Tom Brady can just haul and throw a pass, a Hail Mary pass, has no chance of getting caught, but it's going to draw the foul, and it's a spot foul, not a
Hmm.
15-yard penalty. So that's why I just get cynical about this. And I know it's because of gambling and fantasy football
Sure.
and audience attention because they just want to see close games. They don't want
Hmm.
to see blowouts. So I'm gonna be too cynical, and I'm trying to be optimistic about the season in the NFL. But yeah, if I think when I see old games and then I watch today's game, that's what really bugs me. And there were times I was suspicious back in the 80s too when it came to
Yeah.
the 49ers.
Right.
They always got all the calls. But
Right. The
but
the
it's
Raiders,
worse
and
now.
I will die on this hill. The Raiders, people say, oh, the Raiders were the most penalized team in football. Yeah, they were, unless the game was on the line. In the fourth quarter of a close game, the Raiders never, and I mean never, got a flag against them. So it was convenient. Don't think for one second that Don Shula, the Miami Dolphins head coach, sitting at the head of the NFL Rules Committee, didn't have anything to do with the Dolphins being the least penalized team in play. And we could go on and on and on. But man,
Yeah.
I would kill. I would kill for those innocent days now.
Yeah. I mean, because yeah, the amount of clipping calls that got thrown in the 70s. When is the last time you've seen a clip call
I
in
know.
today's game?
I know.
You just don't see it. I mean, some of the calls that I see, I'm going, man, I forgot all about that being a penalty.
Yeah.
Because they never call that. Um, yeah, the rules changes help a lot, but yeah, it's just the calls I used to make. How many times I saw, illegal block in the back on a running play, no less. Clipping, um, roughing the passer, that didn't happen too often. You really had to waylay a guy to get roughing the passer. Well, hell, Terry Bradshaw got knocked unconscious in Super Bowl 10 from Larry Cole, forearm first, right in the ear hole.
Yeah, and that wasn't a flag, was it? That wasn't a
No.
flag. I didn't think so. Now, Terry Bradshaw, the year before, no, that was the year after. Getting spiked, literally body spiked by Turkey Jones of the Cleveland Browns. Jim McMahon in '86 getting spiked, by Martin of the Green Bay Packers, ending his season. Those were roughing the passer penalties, but that happened literally. The receiver had already caught the ball downfield and been tackled. The play had been over for that long when those guys got spiked. And only then did it draw a flag. And now the ridiculous. Again, we don't want to get me started.
Yeah. Well, Larry Zonka is the only player who's ever, speaking of the old Dolphins, Larry Zonka is the only player who's ever been called for unnecessary roughness on a defensive player.
Yeah.
And it's against the Buffalo Bills. Here's a poor little defensive back coming in to make a tackle on Zonka. Now, Zonka is 6'2", and I think he was around 230 back then. He takes that forearm, comes up, catches this guy under the chin. He goes up in the air from the impact as he throws that forearm up. And you see this guy sail out of bounds and hit the ground. And the flags come at him, and they said, yeah, look what Zonka did to that poor defensive back. Yeah, it's a different game back then.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so real quick, I know we only got through half the schedule. I think we left off, speaking of Jacksonville and Thursday Night Football, I think that's where we left off, Week 7 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think both of us said this is an important game because you're coming off of a road game against the Texans, and Jacksonville's probably the first real playoff contending team that you're going to be facing on the schedule because they were in the playoffs last year. How do you see this game playing out? Now, you're playing at home, so that's at least a benefit.
It is and it isn't. You're also doing it on a Thursday night, which we have seen most teams have a significant advantage. Most home teams have a significant advantage in these Thursday night matchups. But Jacksonville is not exactly a long road trip for the to New Orleans. And it is interesting. I mean, by that point on the schedule, the Saints would have already faced two divisional foes in Carolina, and Tampa Bay. But they're returning home after back-to-back road trips at New England and at Houston, like you pointed out. Jacksonville, at this point in the schedule, Jacksonville is the only team that had a winning record the previous year and one of only two playoff teams. And I look for the Jaguars. I'm not going to put them in the contenders, in the Super Bowl contenders bracket of the AFC yet, but you got to say that they're an up and coming young team. So it's going to be an important gauge to see where Dennis Allen's group is as this team gears up for the mid-season point. You're playing a playoff team. You're playing them at home, and what very few people are talking. I've said it several times, but what very few people are talking about is the lack of home field advantage for the New Orleans Saints the last 2 or 3 years, even the last couple of years of Sean Payton. 2020 you can kind of throw out the window because of the COVID situation, lack of attendance, etc. But even late in the 2019 season, and certainly it was noticeable 2021 and last year. This team just doesn't seem to have as dominant an edge at home. They need to regain that, and they need to regain it against the quote unquote upper echelon level of their schedule. And you have to consider, when you look at the schedule for the Saints right now, you have to put the Jacksonville Jaguars as one of those upper echelon teams that they're going to face at home. So I think it's going to be a great gauge, at least when you look at the schedule at this stage. It's going to be a great gauge to see where Dennis Allen's squad is at this point as they head towards the midseason point.
Well, my dad pointed this out to me the other day, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this too. That Jacksonville game is only the third home game
Yeah.
on the schedule. They would have already played 4 road games, and they go on the road again the following week.
Hmm.
So, talking about a home field advantage, you're not home field enough to get an advantage. So, again, this is a very 2000 feeling because the 2000 team started out, I think, 1-3, something like that. Um, and it took the fans a while to latch on to this team and start believing. 2006, it was a little different because it was after Katrina, the return to the dome, and so forth. But yeah, if you want to get that dome field advantage, you really have to have a good road game where you have to be coming into this game no worse than 4-2.
Yeah.
5-1 would be great, but I'm sorry, 6-1. You want to be in a strong position to get the home crowd in there because if this is a 3-4 or a 4-3 team coming in, you're not going to get people really to watch this game or get involved in this game.
Hmm.
You would have to end up because you go on the road to Annapolis. I'll get your thoughts on that in a second. Then you're home for Chicago. Then you go on the road again to Minnesota. Then you bye. So you're not going to have another chance to really get the crowd behind you until December, was a 3-game homestand.
Yeah.
So that is probably the one thing that's not talked about very much in this season. How many road games they have, and I think they play the majority of the games on the road. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah,
7 of the first 11 games are on the road.
Yeah, so they play 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 road games and 8 home games. So it's going to be tough to get that dome field advantage unless you have a great road record. You beat Jacksonville, then Indianapolis, which I think that is a very winnable game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of quarterback AR-15 Anthony Richardson's going to be at that point. But I think Indianapolis has a lot of holes, a lot of problems. You should win that game. Now, that's 2 days before Halloween, but you should win that game. So now you're coming back to play Chicago and the Fields experiment. Chicago is an up-and-coming team, but I think if they show with Houston, with Carolina, with Tennessee, the ability to keep a running quarterback corralled, how do you see these 2 games playing out? A running quarterback with the Colts and a running quarterback with the Bears.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head as far as the Saints defense has to prove that they can contain that type of player, something that Dennis Allen's defense has always, and I mean always, struggled with. We're going well past a decade. Now Dennis Allen defense is just unable to solve mobile quarterbacks. But we saw the Saints really address that a lot. All their defensive line additions, not only the draft picks, but the Saunders and Shepard, the free agent signings, athletic guys that can move, and sideline to sideline pursuit. Don't think for one second that that's not done for a purpose. To contain or players that can run down these mobile guys. So if they prove that they can do that, I really like the matchups against Houston, against Indianapolis, against Chicago, Carolina too. Guys with younger teams with younger mobile quarterbacks. Because I'm with you. I don't see the Indianapolis Colts as a very good team at all. I expect they'll be my prediction is they'll be one of the worst teams in the NFL, certainly the AFC this year. But Richardson is the wild card because he does have so much athleticism. The Bears, I put a little bit more advanced than what Indianapolis is. I like the way Chicago was playing down the stretch last year, but Justin Fields has a lot to prove. Not with his legs. He was very dangerous, with his legs last year, but he has to prove that he could beat teams with his arm. And until he does, the Bears are going to be a question mark, but a dangerous team. Um, Dangerous because again, Dennis Allen defenses have always struggled against that. And then after back-to-back weeks of Indianapolis and Chicago, dealing with mobile quarterbacks on teams that have major question marks, then you have to hit the road again and go play a team that has literally lived in your nightmares if you're a longtime Saints fan.
Hmm. Yeah. Minnesota in Minnesota. You got to deal with those receivers. Now, whether Dalvin Cook is still on that team or not, that's one of the rumors, and if we have time, we'll talk about the Hunter Renfrow rumors as well. But you really want to put this game on Kirk Cousins' shoulders, but you also
Mhm.
want to go after Kirk Cousins and get him
Mhm.
uncomfortable so he does make bad decisions with the football. So yeah, that's another game that's for the defense. Um, so then you get your bye week. Then you play Atlanta for the first time. Atlanta is talking a lot of smack for a team that has a hard time climbing out of bed without falling in their face. Um,
Yeah.
I, I look at this team. I said, okay, so you're really going with Ritter, all right? Which Ritter's not a bad quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback either. He is a quarterback always looking to upgrade from.
Hmm.
Um, they've got a running game. They got the best running back in the draft, but they have no passing weapons. So if you can shut this running game down, I mean, Kyle Pitts, yeah, but it's kind of like putting Kellen Winslow Sr. on the '85 Bears. He doesn't fit.
Right.
He's not a blocker. He's not. He's a guy that needs to have a quarterback who can stretch the field.
Hmm.
That's how he functions, and that's not how Atlanta is built.
No.
It's a strange combination, and honestly, I will be surprised if Kyle Pitts is on this team uh, over the next couple of seasons. I think they would love to be able to, because they're not going to build a team that fits a Kyle Pitts
Right.
kind of tight end. So if I'm Terry Fontenot, and because I don't want to see him anymore in this division either, um, I'm looking at Kyle Pitts to try and pick up extra draft picks
Yeah.
so I can build my offensive and defensive line. Uh, so it's. I think in this game, especially playing in Atlanta, New Orleans traditionally does well in Atlanta. Um, this is the game that we can finally take the series lead, all-time series lead, counting the playoff game, because I think we're tied right now. I
Yes.
know we
54,
took the
54.
lead. I know we took the lead, regular season lead last year, but they've got that one playoff loss against because Bobby Hebert sucks. Uh, Hebert, that game is also on YouTube,
Yeah.
and he just he melts down in that second half, and that's why Michael Haynes was able to light up
Hmm.
the secondary because we could not get a consistent drive going.
Yeah.
He threw an interception right in the end zone, right to Deion Sanders early in that game. It's frustrating. Bear, if you, I'm going off on a tangent here, but a lot of people like to put Bear at number 2 all-time Saints quarterbacks. I don't do that. Um, I grudgingly give it to Aaron Brooks only because Aaron Brooks has the better stats.
Yeah.
Aaron Brooks is also equally frustrating. But
Yeah.
really, if you sit and watch a Bobby Hebert game, and I'm talking like I watched the 1988 Saints Rams game. Now Hebert played a great game against the Redskins the week before in
Hmm.
'88. Just they lost that game because Dexter Manley spit in the face of Jim Dombrowski. But the following week, he's playing in Los Angeles. Now, you have to win this game to stay in first place. They lose 4 games to end the season. That's
Yeah.
why they didn't make the playoffs. But you have to win this game to stay in first place. Hebert throws an interception to. He tries to fit this pass to, I think it's Hobie Brenner, and there's 4 Rams right there in the end zone. Meanwhile, Eric Martin is wide open in the back of the end zone, and he throws his pass right to a Ram. And then the next series, he throws it down the middle, and there ain't a receiver to be seen except for one Ram guy who looked lost. And he's like, "Oh, look, somebody throwing me a football." It's horrible. He is horrible in this game. They win 14-10. The Saints win 14-10, but it's not because of Bobby Hebert. Believe me.
No,
So, yeah.
and good Bobby Hebert was very good. Forget caretaker or a clock manager, game manager, anything like that. Obviously, that's what Hebert was there to do. But he could put up some numbers with the best of them. Good Hebert. Bad Hebert, it made you think of, and I'm young fans. You'll have to pull out your Wikipedia. Kelly Stouffer, Rick Meyer. Rick Meyer was bad Hebert. And I know Meyer didn't come along until the early '90s anyway, but that's a good comparison in my opinion. I could see the debate, putting Hebert at number 2, behind Breeze as the all-time, among all-time Saints quarterbacks. But I'm with you. I put Aaron Brooks there because Aaron Brooks was a little bit more consistent, believe it or not. Ability-wise, I'll put this guy at number 2 all day. I wish the Saints would have got him. I wish the Saints would have got him about 3 or 4 years before they did. But that didn't happen, so that's neither here nor there. Good Hebert was fun to watch. Could put up some numbers, but bad Hebert, my God.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in the 91 and 92 playoffs, you got both.
Yeah,
you got good
literally
Hebert in the Atlanta game for almost a half, and for the Eagles game, you get him for 3 quarters. You get good Hebert for 3 quarters, but then in the fourth quarter, you get the worst of Hebert.
Yeah.
You also find out why Pat Swilling got traded, because Reggie White throws or Stan Brott like a friggin' rag doll for that safety. I mean, he did that hump move, and here comes 67. And I went, holy crap, that happened. I was at that game, yes, John. But because that was the closest I ever wanted to come. That's the closest I ever came to wanting to kill a fellow human being, was after that game, because I was so mad that all this happened right in front of me. Literally, I'm like 30 yards from the action happening, because I'm in that end zone and I'm watching this shit unfold in front of me, and I'm going, what in the hell? My wife she was dating me at the time, and she still married me after that game because I was furious. Oh my God. That was one of those feelings like, you're never going to win, are you? You're never going to win. But Carl Smith offense. I've talked about Carl Smith many, many times. No one called a better 3rd and 5 pass play on 3rd and 7 than Carl Smith. I mean, that happens. You get to watch that in the 88 and 89 season. 3rd and 7, they got Eric Martin running a 5-yard drag route. Really? Get beyond the damn sticks, I was at that playoff game, the Eagles Saints game, and that was in the zone, and that was infuriating. I'm sorry, I'm going on this far tangent because we're talking about Bobby Hebert, but I think we can win that game against Atlanta. I think we should be able to go up finally in the all-time series now, counting the playoff game. And of course, we finished the season with Atlanta. That's a TBD game, because they're not sure if they're going to play that on a Saturday or a Sunday, depending if they're fighting for a division. I'm going to say chances are this is going to get played Sunday at noon.
Yeah.
So, but they have that as a flex schedule game. The main thing I want to get your thoughts about is a 3-game homestand. To me, this makes or breaks the season. Assuming they have a good first half of the year, I think this 3-game homestand determines whether or not A, they get in the playoffs,
Mhm.
and B, if Dennis Allen is going to be the coach next year. And
Mhm.
I don't say that because I want Dennis Allen fired, but if they lose this 3-game homestand against the Lions, Panthers, and Giants, I can't see Allen surviving that. Even if they get a ton of injuries and it goes off the rails, kind of like how it did last year, I just feel like that, though, because you have played so few home games, you're trying to get this crowd and the city back behind you.
Yeah.
I think you have to beat the Lions, the Panthers, and the Giants, because I think the Panthers are extremely beatable.
Yeah.
I think as good as the Giants were last year, I think the Giants, like the Vikings, I don't call them frauds because I think the Vikings were frauds, but
Mhm.
I think the Giants won a lot of games because things fell their way late in games,
Mhm.
allowed them to win, much like the Vikings did. So I think this is the year that Giants kind of, and Daniel Jones kind of swings back being the inconsistent Giants. So Detroit's the wild card of this group because they have the potential to be a really, really good team or the same old Lions. So how do you see this? How these 3 games?
I agree with what you said about all 3 teams. Yeah, I understand why people are on the Lions bandwagon. I'm on the Lions bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think unless they are the same old Lions, there's no reason why that team shouldn't win the NFC North, maybe even run away with it. Uh,
Yeah.
the Panthers. I see the Panthers. The Panthers could be, along with the Falcons, could be the Saints' primary competition for the NFC South title. I think Carolina's a little bit too young on the offensive side of the ball still, but you never know. By this point, by this December 10th home game against Carolina, remember that's a rematch.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that a young roster would be starting to come together by then. So the Panthers could be very dangerous. The Giants, I'm with you. I think Brian Daboll deserved Coach of the Year last year, but I think they punched above their weight class almost that entire season. And although I respect what they did, and man, was it a gutty effort. I look for them to come back down to earth a little bit. And what angers me about this Saints schedule is that's literally these 3 home games are literally the only time that this team has back-to-back home weeks this season. So I've been pointing this out to
Mm-hmm.
people that are saying, "Oh, look at the strength of schedule." No, don't pay any attention to strength of schedule. Pay more attention to when these games are happening. Now, it's a good thing that that they're not playing any away games in cold weather cities at this time of the year. But I think it's very striking that they only have the one back-to-back home game, and it's for 3 straight weeks. So I agree with you. I think if the Saints are going to be a playoff team, it's assumed that they have to play well on the road to get to this point. But once they're here,
Mm-hmm.
they probably need to go 3-0 in these home games. Certainly no worse than 2-1 to have a realistic chance at the playoffs. And making the playoffs and Dennis Allen coming back for a 3rd year, I think, are synonymous. I think
Mm-hmm.
if this team doesn't make the playoffs, Dennis Allen is not back. It's literally as simple as that. And we'll have all off season to talk about who the greatest pressure is on, why it's my opinion it's on Dennis Allen, and I wrote something about that this past week. But if this team is going, it needs to come into December still in contention. And coming out of this 3-game homestand with no worse than a 2-1 record, you're likely going to have to go 3-0, because you come out of this 3-game homestand, you're going to your own, historically your own house of horrors when you go to the LA Rams. Then you finish up with two
Mm-hmm.
divisional opponents. Yeah. You have to hold court at home. That's one of the reasons why the 2021 Saints and why the 2022 Saints did not make the playoffs. They didn't play well at home, not as well as we're accustomed to seeing them play anyway.
Exactly. And that's exactly how I see this. Um, it's hard enough to get the fans behind you because you're playing so few home games. But when you have your home stretch, you want to build that dome field advantage. That's the games you have to do it in because yeah, you're going to the LA Rams. Don't know what kind of team that's going to be. Matthew
Mm-hmm.
Stafford could be comeback player of the year, or he could be done. And you're playing Stetson Bennett or someone like that. In a game. Um, I still feel like that he thought long and hard. The head coach of the Rams thought long and hard about retiring, but he didn't want to leave on that low note. So if McVay feels like that this is a season down the drain, he could be mentally checked out if the season's playing that badly. Now
Sure.
the reverse could be true. He could be fighting for the division title. He could be fighting for, a division championship because
Mm-hmm.
the Cardinals are in free fall. Seattle, you don't know how this team is going to play this year. They're betting on Geno Smith again. Um, the 49ers, pretty much people are everybody giving them the division title by default. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Brock Purdy doesn't respond well to the surgery. And Trey Lance looks like a first round bust. You know, they still have a defense, but they've lost a defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that defense is going to be as good. I mean, they lost that defensive coordinator who's now head coach of the Jets, but they lost a defensive coordinator before. But it wasn't back to back years that defense was still dominant.
Yeah.
It took a little while for that defense to come back. There's all kinds of wild cards in this thing. So, yeah, I mean, and it ends a Thursday night game against the Rams, which could be flexed. It could not be, might not be flexed, but that's Christmas week. New Year's Eve, they go to Tampa. I think Tampa will probably either be ready to fire the coach or is playing to see how close they are to Caleb Williams
Yeah.
because I think that's who they're tanking for.
Yeah.
So who knows how that game's going to play out. It'll be interesting to see because in 2015, I'm sorry, 2015, was it 2015? Yeah, 2015 because Winston was the first round pick in
Mm-hmm.
2016. So 2015, they were actually beating the Saints before they went, whoa, 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 we're screwing up our tank. Now let's just stop calling good plays and let the Saints win this game. Tampa could be in that same position. So then you wrap up the season with the Falcons again. Who knows what the Falcons are playing for? Who knows what the Saints are playing for? Like you said, the Carolina and Atlanta game, both those could be for the division title. Um, I think to win the division title, you have to go no worse than 5-1 in the division. 4-2 is going to be tough because depending on who the two games are that you lose to, that could affect tiebreakers.
Yeah.
If you were to be swept by Carolina or swept by Atlanta, which God, I hope that doesn't happen, but if you were to be swept by one of those two teams, that could prevent you from winning the division title. So that's why I said
Absolutely.
5-1, because I really don't think Tampa is going to beat you either time. I think that those are two games you're going to win. But five and one, I think, is what you have to be, and that means you have to split with either Atlanta or Carolina. And I can see a split with Carolina, honestly. I really don't see a split with Atlanta because of when you're playing them. You're playing Atlanta the week after. You're coming out of a bye to
Hmm.
play Atlanta at home. Yeah, play Atlanta at their stadium, and then you're hosting Atlanta at the end of the season. When you're if you lose that game, chances are it's because either your season's lost or you're resting your starters.
Yeah.
Honestly, so I think Carolina is the team that you have a better shot of splitting with because you played them slowly, and the Saints are a slow starter. But I think you have to beat them at home. But unfortunately, we seem to do better in Carolina than we do in New Orleans. I
Not
mean, is that
counting the
how
last
does
two
that?
years, where the last
Yeah,
2 years they've decided not to board the plane, to get on the trip to Charlotte. Uh, but again, folks, you have to look at when they're playing these teams. Frank Reich, I think, is going to do an outstanding job. As the Panthers coach, I love him as a head coach. Uh, but no matter how you cut it, the Carolina Panthers are going to have a new face at quarterback. Whether it is Bryce Young, and I expect it would be, even in week two, or if you believe what they're saying, and that Andy Dalton is going to start. Yeah, Andy Dalton's been around the block, but we know that he's, from his time in New Orleans, that he's very limited. And even if he wasn't, he's still a new face for that offense. And oh, by the way, this is the Panthers offense that traded away all their viable weapons last year. There's no
mm-hmm.
Christian McCaffrey. There's no DJ Moore. They do have a couple of nice pieces, but again, they're all new. So there is no reason why the Saints shouldn't have a significant advantage on paper going into Carolina in week two. But again, just like with Atlanta, this is going to be a far improved Panthers team when they have to turn around and face them in the rematch, in week 14 in New Orleans. And I think
Yeah.
I like the Panthers roster far more than I like the Falcons roster when I just look at each of them as a
Mm-hmm.
whole. I like what Atlanta's doing defensively, and I love the fact that they want to play a physical brand of football. But it's like what you said about Kyle Pitts and Drake London, their first round pick at wide receiver with the Falcons last year. Uh, if you're going to run a physical brand of offense, then what are you doing drafting? And Drake London's a big bodied receiver, but he's not a physical guy. He's not a Michael Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little bit more of a finesse guy. So yeah, you're curious where the pieces are going to fit with Atlanta. With Carolina, you see what their strategy is. Now, the players that they selected for the strategy, they obviously have to pay off, but at least you see the specific direction that they intend on going in.
Exactly. I feel the same way too. I think if you're going to see Andy Dalton, it's a Monday night game week two as well. Um, I think you have a chance of seeing Andy Dalton, more likely to see Andy Dalton as a starter on Monday night, with maybe Bryce Young coming in to relieve him
Mhm.
if he's struggling, because I think Bryce Young will be starting by week 14, but he is also a slender quarterback,
Mhm.
and I say this because I'm making sure not to use the word small, because Drew Brees and Doug Flutie were short quarterbacks. They weren't small though. They had a
Nope.
solid core to them, and Drew Brees had really large hands that enabled him to grip the ball. Bryce Young, I like the player a lot, but
Mhm.
he has shoulders. I think they're about this wide. Um, he is a slender built quarterback, which means he doesn't have a very strong core. That doesn't mean he can't play, but it does mean that he is more susceptible to injuries than a guy with more broad shoulders. Because Drew was broad shouldered, he was just
Yes.
short. Um, so Bryce Young is a short, slender quarterback. What that means is if a 300-pound guy gets a good clean shot at him, especially with his arm raised, and you catch him right here under the
Mm-hmm.
armpit, it's going to hurt, and it's
Yeah.
going to hurt bad.
Yeah.
And I, you know, um, uh, yeah, I don't think Carolina's got the offensive line to protect a guy like that.
Not yet.
And
They're building one, but yeah,
yeah,
there's still a lot of pieces that have to come together.
hmm so if you're talking about a guy starting 17 games, I think you're going to see a lot of Andy Dalton
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they signed him, because he is not a guy. He is very much a Wade Wilson kind of quarterback at this point in his career. And I don't mean prime Wade Wilson. I mean the Wade Wilson we saw towards the end of his career with the Saints and with Dallas. He is a guy that you can put out there for a little while. He'll do some stuff for you, kind of like a good starter, but the longer he's out there, the more his limitations show. So that's the advantage the Saints have with Carolina is, they're a young team that's missing pieces. They're trying to build a team around a Bryce Young, but I think at this point of the season, that's why you have to win these games. But I'm also worried week against Carolina, the Saints coming out as a slow starting team. That's a game that Carolina might steal.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I think Atlanta, we can sweep Atlanta because I think if you take the run away from Atlanta, they really can't. They can't compete with you. If you get in a shootout with them, I don't think Atlanta can compete to that
No.
level. I think the defense is going to be a lot better, especially when you're playing Atlanta. Like you said, you're playing Atlanta after a bye week. You're playing Atlanta at the end of the season, so that bodes well for a 5-1 record in the division, and I think a 5-1 record will get you to the playoffs. Last thing before we wrap up tonight, I know we were going to talk about what to expect next year, who's going to be the breakout players, who's the players that are fighting for their job, and so forth. We didn't get to that part. We'll probably talk more about that next week.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want to get off the air without talking about Hunter Renfrow. It's that point of the season, off season leading into training camp. Rumors about reuniting even more Raiders. How do you see this Hunter Renfrow rumor flying? I mean, the Raiders just paid him, so
Yeah.
that's what's weird for me. But it's the Raiders. We're talking about a really bad ownership group that's about to get worse if Tom Brady does actually buy a portion
Mm-hmm.
of it. But regardless, do you see them after paying Hunter Renfrow trading him away?
I can see it only because it's the Raiders, and you pointed out the ownership group. I'll add in one of the dumbest head coaches, personnel movement wise, of all time. And Josh McDouchebag. And so yeah, from that point of view, I can't see it happening. Do I actually see it taking fruition? No, I don't. Because I don't think that they're going to get the deal that they want for him. Hunter Renfrow, on paper, he's really worth a third round, fourth round pick, maybe a couple of mid round picks. And I'm not sure that they're going to get that for Hunter Renfrow at this stage of the game. Not after the NFL draft is already concluded and the teams are already so proud of the shiny new receivers that they drafted in the first, second, or third round, whatever the case may be. And you look at it from a New Orleans Saints point of view. Yeah, I know it makes sense because you have a former Raider quarterback in Derek Carr, who has a former Raider coach in Dennis Allen, and teamed him up with a former Raider tight end in Foster Moreau, and another former Raider backup receiver in Brian Edwards. Folks, that's as far as it's going to go. The Saints already have a solid receiver room. Hunter Renfrow is legitimately a number 2 receiver in this league. Maybe given the type of money that he's making. Maybe he's willing to take a number 3 receiver role, maybe, but that's a big question mark even in New Orleans because you're going to have a guy like Rashid Shaheed. He's going to be your big play threat. He might not be your consistent number 3 receiver, but he's going to get number 3 snaps. And are you going to take snaps away from Chris Olave? Are you going to take snaps away from Michael Thomas if Michael Thomas is healthy? If he's not, and Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis already know this behind the scenes. If Michael Thomas is never going to be Michael Thomas again, then you have to make this deal. If you truly believe, though, that you can get a healthy Michael Thomas back, then you're absolutely insane to make this deal. It eats up the salary cap space that you have left that you could roll over into next year or save. And if you do, knock on wood, have an injury on the defensive side, where you could bring in a defensive veteran, that's what I think they're going to save it for. There's just not enough footballs to go around to bring in a Hunter Renfrow to trade, give away your assets. And Saints, the only people that are legitimately talking up this rumor are Saints fans that want to make this happen. And fans that want to make it happen, you want to trade Traquan Smith and Zach Bond, and maybe throw in a Malcolm Roach or a Peyton Turner. Guys, just because you don't want them doesn't mean other teams want them. Yeah, the Raiders are the stupidest franchise walking right now, but they're not going to take your trash and give up one of their few tradable commodities. So no, I can't see a Hunter Renfrow trade to the New Orleans Saints happening no time soon.
Yeah, I'm definitely of the opinion that if the Hunter Renfrow trade was going to happen, it was going to happen, number one, before they paid that signing bonus.
Yes.
And number two, if they were going to get anything of value, I mean, we all bitched about how little they got for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. The Raiders would get even less than that for Renfrow now. And
right.
If they hold on to training camp, you're looking at a 7th-round pick and a box of hot fries. I mean, that's basically what you would get for him because the Raiders. And who are the Raiders going to replace him with? Because the Raiders aren't. He's got an unworkable contract, and who are they going to replace him with unless Josh McDaniels is like, you know what? F this season, let's tank, and we'll be in the running for Caleb Williams. And if that happens, McDaniels isn't going to be there to survive, to coach this quarterback.
You wouldn't think.
The only reason why he wasn't fired last year was because Mark Davis, who looks like he gets a McDonald's shake for not shitting his pants every day. But Mark Davis said to the media, I can't afford to fire him. That's how broke he is. That's why Tom Brady's talking about being part of this ownership group because, good God, somebody with an IQ above room temperature's got it and has money has to be able to fund this franchise. They moved to Las Vegas for money. It's the same reason why the Browns left Cleveland for Baltimore.
Yep.
Art Modell had no money left. He was borrowing money from the banks to afford to pay Andre Rison way back in 1994 or 95. That's why that Modell moved the Browns and took the Browns. It wasn't a lack of fan support. That's for damn sure. And that team was about to be a playoff team under Bill Belichick. But he had to leave because he had no revenue coming to him. Mark Davis is cash poor. Al Davis left him a cash poor franchise. All the mistakes Al Davis made helped make him poor. And Al Davis wasn't that wealthy compared to the other NFL owners. Wasn't that wealthy to begin with.
No.
So, yeah, that team, the Raiders have a lot of problems that isn't going to be fixed by trading away assets and losing even more money. So that's my biggest reason why this trade won't happen. Now, my biggest reason why it will happen, the Saints are looking at Michael Thomas, and they want insurance for Michael Thomas.
They do.
They don't feel confident that Michael Thomas can play 17 games, and they will make a deal for, like I said, a 6th or 7th round pick and a bag of hot chips or something like that, and make the Raiders eat some of that money.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and if that's what it comes to, if that's what you can get Hunter Renfrow for, and if you do, if that happens, they would have to play the waiting game with the Raiders. And it's the kind of deal that wouldn't happen until just before the start of the regular season, and you have to hope that another team doesn't make a better offer for him. And that's a lot of ifs that we just threw out there. But if that all happens, then yeah, I can absolutely see the reasoning behind it, because Renfrow's contract, it really only hits your salary cap hard this year. There's two, I think he has 2, maybe 3 years remaining on it. There's some wiggle room over the next 2 years, and which boomerangs us back to Michael Thomas. There's a big time out in Michael Thomas's deal. Essentially, he's on a 1-year deal with the Saints. This is why I don't think Michael Thomas is going to be a New Orleans Saint after this year. He's betting on himself, and if he plays big, he's going to command big money. The Saints aren't going to pay that. If he plays poorly, then the Saints aren't going to want to pay him the big money that he's still going to be hoping for. So, either way, Thomas bet on himself to surprise a lot of us and even be back in a Saints uniform. But if he plays big, he's going to price himself out of being a Saint for 2024. So you're going to need an answer at that position. Maybe it's A.T. Perry. We don't know. It's hard to say when A.T., a 6th round pick, hasn't even taken a meaningful snap again. And that's another reason to make a deal for a Hunter Renfrow, because Hunter Renfrow can fill a Michael Thomas role. So there's lots of reasons to do it, but we also just outlined the reasons why it won't happen.
Yeah. And I think to dovetail what you just said about wanting to play the waiting game with the Raiders, the Saints are going to see what A.T. Perry looks like, what these other undrafted guys look like. What does Michael Thomas look like? How is Carr doing with the receivers that he's got right now? If Edwards stinks, or Edwards just isn't really getting the offense, and if the receiver from the Steelers, whose name escapes me right now, but if these guys just aren't making it with them, then the Saints can say, you know what, I don't like my receiving room. And that's a big difference between Dennis Allen and Sean Payton. He looks at the receiving core and he goes, you know what, I need to do something better. I need to do something different. And he's going to make that move. But I think there's a lot of time between now and training camp to evaluate these guys and see what you got there. We really went time today a lot further than I planned on it.
Yeah, speaking of time, I'm out of it.
I can tell. James Washington from the Steelers. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I couldn't remember his name. I just knew it was yet another number 13. Real quick, what do you have going on in Bayou Blitz tomorrow night?
We are going to talk about some bubble players, like you and I sort of touched on tonight. Brendan and I are. There's no reason to talk about who looked good in OTAs and who didn't. If you were on the field, you look good. If you walked off the field under your own power, you look good. That's as simple as OTAs are. But we're going to project a little bit. Some of the things that we'd like to see over the next 2 weeks of mini camp, and again, we're going to project some of the potential roster bubble players. As you and I expand on potential bubble players and breakout players next week on this show.
Good deal. And then one of these days we have to get your boy behind you on this show.
Yes.
It's also hard to find games from 1995.
It is.
On YouTube. And there are some really good Jim Everett games. I would love to, talk to him about, especially his connections with Quinn Early and Wesley Walls. So I'd love to get him on the show and also have him kind of break down Carr
Hmm.
and Hainer, and these quarterbacks today, and how much I'm sure he would love to play in today's game.
He would.
Yeah, he really would. So, and that's going to be in the future. We'll talk more about that later on, especially in this summertime where we're trying to figure out topics to have. But in the meantime, thank you guys for sticking with us and letting us go on our rant and ramble about Roger Goodell and the schedule. But thanks, Bob, for sticking with me too. My long rambling, going off in different directions, but it's always fun to get you going about Roger Goodell.
I know it
Uh,
is.
he didn't even take a cigarette break. That's how relaxed he is after getting that off his chest. So that's
Alan, I'm
good.
coming up. I'm about 15 minutes shy of 81 hours without a cigarette.
Really, you're
Really.
trying to
And
give
then
up
you
smoking.
throw out Goodell at me. You're not helping.
Lauren, I am so very, very, very sorry. um,
She's
Stay
laughing.
strong. I know I can hear her, yeah. Congratulations, Lauren. That was a great job on that marathon. I never get a chance
So
to say that last week, but that was great. That was great. Um, in the
thank
meantime,
you.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Bob, go to bed. Don't smoke. Get the patch. And we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.